and welcome back to Adventures with Ariel. For the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be giving y'all an inside look on the relationship and rivalry between the world's most famous animation giants, Disney and Pixar. In this two-parter, I'll be delving into their past and attempt to find out how the Disney and Pixar relationship affected the two companies and their films. If we look back about a decade ago, Pixar was doing much better than Disney both financially and critically. But lately, Disney has been owning the animation industry while Pixar has fallen behind with a bad case of sequilitis. Okay, so Disney might have that as well. So how did we get here? To find that out, let's take a look back at Disney and Pixar's long and complicated relationship. Once upon a time, the company we know today as Pixar was a division of Lucasfilm. Then named the Graphics Group, the company developed an expensive graphics imaging computer that could be used in film production. Around the same time, Steve Jobs was dealing with the poor reception of the Macintosh, and therefore wanted to prove he was still the king of hardware. So in 1986, Jobs spent $10 million to spin the Graphics Group off as an independent company. From the beginning, Pixar's goal was to create the first animated feature film using computer graphics, but they knew that that would take a lot of time and money. So in the meantime, Pixar raised revenue by producing commercials and selling rendering software. They also produced several computer animated shorts, including the Oscar-winning short film Tin Toy. Disney was highly impressed by their work, and in 1991, they persuaded Pixar to sign a $26 million deal that would allow the Walt Disney Company to develop, produce, and distribute up to 3 animated feature films. At this time, their 1989 film, The Little Mermaid, had become Disney's most successful film to date, and the company was ready to take more chances on innovative animation techniques. Another part of the deal was that Disney would retain the rights to any sequels that were made. This would later prove to be a contributing factor to Disney and Pixar's rocky relationship. Soon after, the Pixar crew began working on their first project, Toy Story. Under the supervision of Disney, Toy Story would become the world's first feature-length computer animated film. Steve Jobs wouldn't be creatively involved with Pixar's productions, and would instead handle the business side of things, including the negotiations with Disney. Disney and Pixar were butting heads from the very start of Toy Story's production. Upon learning about the plans for Pixar's debut, then CEO Michael Eisner asked, who would want to see a movie about a little boy who plays with dolls? John Lasseter, who was the then head of Pixar's creative department, before all of this happened, has said that the first thing they did when they began thinking about Toy Story was make a list of things that they did not want in the film. There wouldn't be anything resembling the hallmarks of the Disney movies that were being made at the time. This meant no musical numbers, no larger-than-life villains, and no animal sidekicks. Toy Story would be a buddy picture. Jeffrey Katzenberg, who headed Disney's film division, liked the buddy comedy approach, but pushed to make the film more mature, therefore clashing with the Pixar team over creative decisions. Peter Schneider, who headed Disney's animation department, was upset that Katzenberg was using a third party rather than Disney's own animation department to make the film. This resulted in tireless, endless meetings where Disney executives micromanaged Pixar's filmmakers. Katzenberg was determined to mold the film into what he thought would work best. He had a very different kind of vision for Toy Story, pushing for the film to have a darker, more cynical edge, therefore appealing to adults as much as kids. This can be seen most clearly in the film's earliest storyboards, where Woody is seen as borderline psychotic.
I just use this vast reserve of brain power to consider this for a moment. If it wasn't for me, Andy wouldn't pay any attention to you at all. In fact, my sketchy friend, you would have been hauled away to Goodwill a long time ago, so shut your mouth and get them off the bed!
On November 19th, 1993, a day later referred to by the crew as Black Friday, Pixar brought this version of the film to Disney's offices in Burbank. Disney hated the film so much that Peter Schneider wanted it canceled and all of the Pixar animators fired. Katzenberg was also shocked by how bad it was, but soon realized that the film was no longer the movie Pixar had wanted to make, but rather one that they had been forced to make. So Pixar was free to rework the script themselves, without any involvement from Disney. Meanwhile, Steve Jobs was pursuing options to sell off Pixar, but as production progressed, he sensed that Pixar was probably on the verge of revolutionizing the animation industry. And boy, was he right about that. Upon Toy Story's release on November 22nd, 1995, it was an enormous success. The film was #1 at the US box office for 3 weekends, raked in $362 million worldwide, and became the highest grossing movie of that year. The visuals were astounding and the storytelling was contemporary, drastically different from any of the fairy tales previously put out by Walt Disney Animation. This would mark the start of a new era for both Disney and Pixar alike. Pixar would work to prove to its distribution partner that it was more than just a one-hit wonder, while also serving as their creative rival. Shortly after Toy Story's release, John Lasseter and Steve Jobs had a meeting about the destiny of Pixar. Lasseter wanted Pixar's filmmakers to have a final say on all creative decisions, while Jobs thought that a business executive might need to steer the company, as was customary at most Hollywood movie studios. To this, Lasseter said, quote, "We don't want to make safe films. We want to keep breaking barriers in story and animation. We have ideas for incredible original stories. It's so rare to do original work. That's what we can do. It's what we have to do." Jobs was convinced, and in the years to come, Lasseter would lead Pixar to an unprecedented string of highly creative and original films. Meanwhile, Disney was pushing for the production of quickly made direct-to-video sequels, produced by the in-house subsidiary Disney Toon Studios. But Pixar wasn't on board. They weren't going to stoop to the level of Enchanted Christmas or Little Mermaid 2: Return to the Sea. Instead, they would produce a theatrical release sequel that met the high bar set by the original film. At breakneck speed, I might add. Seriously, all the files were deleted during production and the movie was remade with mere months to go before the release date. And it didn't stop there. Throughout the millennium's first decade, Pixar was churning out one massive hit after another. Their films exceeded expectations both critically and financially. But the same couldn't be said for the House of Mouse. Disney animation films like Tarzan, The Emperor's New Groove, Lilo and Stitch, and Brother Bear did okay critically and financially, but paled in comparison to the Pixar films released at the same time, as well as Disney's earlier successes such as Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King. In fact, from the years of 1995 to 2008, the average box office for Walt Disney Animation releases added up to $249 million worldwide. In the same time frame, Pixar averaged $555 million, and keep in mind that within this 14-year time span, Pixar had produced 9 films while Walt Disney Animation had produced up to 16. Disney's in-house studio had hit a slump, but needless to say, Pixar was making the company look good. Being that Disney distributed Pixar's films, most families didn't even realize that Pixar was a separate company, so the partnership worked great for everyone. Pixar made great movies, Disney put them out, and as a result, both Disney and Pixar got the credit. Slowly but surely, Pixar would become the new face of Disney animation. In 2003, after Finding Nemo became the highest-grossing animated film of all time, Pixar and Disney attempted to negotiate a new distribution deal. Now that Pixar's movies were more successful than Disney's, Pixar wanted more of the profits and rights, while proposing that Disney would only receive a small distribution fee. In the previous agreements that favored Disney, Disney kept the lion's share of profits as well as rights to the stories and sequels. Steve Jobs and Michael Eisner had very different views on how Pixar should be run, and with negotiations breaking down, Jobs openly announced that Pixar was going to actively pursue other distributors besides Disney for their future films. Great plan, but there was still one tiny little flaw. Disney still had the rights to Pixar's earlier films. So being that their partnership was in jeopardy, Disney decided to make their own sequels to Pixar's films. In fact, Disney set up a studio named Circle 7 Animation to make Toy Story 3, Monsters Inc. 2, and Finding Nemo 2 without any involvement from the original filmmakers at Pixar. John Lasseter was devastated by this announcement, saying, quote, "It's like you have these dear children and you have to give them up to be adopted by convicted child molesters." Well, that's a little intense, John. It never came to this, because eventually Disney realized that they needed Pixar more than Pixar needed them. How did this happen? In 2005, there was a new CEO in town, Bob Iger. Iger was at the opening of Hong Kong Disneyland that very same year and realized that all of the characters in the parade were from Pixar movies because Disney's own animation had become this. So Circle 7 Animation never came to fruition, but that doesn't mean that we don't have all the sequels that they promised us. Toy Story 3, Monsters Inc. 2, Finding Nemo 2, they all exist now. Wait, why are there so many sequels now? And what happened to Disney and Pixar's relationship? Watch next week's video to find out.